So welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining me this evening. I'm Autumn Crow. I'm the Program Director of West Virginia Rivers Coalition. And we also have Jenna Dodson, who's our staff scientist, and we'll be providing this training this evening on how to detect and report pollution incidents from Mountain Valley Pipeline. So this program is a program developed in partnership with Trout Unlimited. So that's why you will see Trout Unlimited logos all over these slides. So we developed this program in 2015 in partnership with Trout Unlimited to monitor impacts from pipeline construction. So Jenna, go ahead and start advancing the slides and we'll get going. Okay, so we have a quick poll. So we're going to launch the poll, and that is just whether or not you live along the Mountain Valley Pipeline route. So if you can go ahead and answer that poll, that'll give us an idea of who our audience is this evening. So go ahead and put in your answers to that poll. Can everyone see the poll? Because I'm not seeing any answers come in yet.
Yep, I could see the poll and I could see some of the answers coming through, Autumn.
Okay, great. Thanks.
It looks like everyone so far has taken the poll. We're at 55 people. Or sorry, we're at about 55 people. So we can give it another minute to let everyone else filter in their answers.
Okay, for some reason I can't see their responses.
Yeah, do you want me to share them?
Yes.
Okay, so so far 55 people have responded, and we have 21 out of 55, that's 38%, saying that yes, they live along the proposed Mountain Valley Pipeline route. And then 58% said no, I do not live along the pipeline route. And 2 people said at 4% that they're not sure.
Okay. Well, thank you for that. That gives us an idea of who's in our audience. So what you'll learn from this webinar is what construction on Mountain Valley Pipeline route remains to be completed, the various methods for pipeline constructions across rivers and streams, what to look for during construction activities, and how to document and report pollution issues or failed best management practices. So there are approximately 549 stream crossings remaining along the Mountain Valley Pipeline route. About 429 of those is going to be open trenching, where they'll dig a trench right through the stream bed. Another 120 locations, they'll use underground boring to cross another 181 water bodies. The boring lengths range from 1,250 feet to 300 feet. So they're varying in lengths. And I'll go into a little bit more detail about the different boring techniques, but the pits vary from 5 feet deep to 45 feet deep. And some of the longer borings can take up to 4 months to complete. So they'll be doing continuous boring 24/7 for 4 months to complete those. If you are interested to see which streams remain, Mountain Valley Watch has developed a really great online mapping tool, and that it's an interactive map, so you can actually zoom in and see which streams have been completed and which stream crossings remain. So that'll be a really useful tool for you to look at and find out whether the streams that you're interested in that are in your neighborhood are still remaining to be crossed. And that map is in the link to that is in the chat for anybody that's interested. So why are we so concerned about the Mountain Valley Pipeline construction? The construction impacts, they can have a lot of impacts on water quality. They can destabilize the stream banks and the stream beds when you're digging an excavator through those stream beds. That can cause increased erosion in the stream bank and the stream bed. It removes the riparian vegetation, which increases stormwater runoff and sedimentation. The dewatering of stream beds for prolonged periods when they are damming the stream and then doing the construction in a dry stream bed, that's going to disrupt feeding and breeding and can cause death in aquatic species if they're not removed from the dewatered areas. We also have a potential to deal with accidental spills of fuels or lubricants, oils, or the drilling mud that is used for some of those underground borings. So though any type of accidental spill can degrade water quality, and also multiple crossings within a watershed can have a cumulative effect from all of the previous impacts that I just spoke about. They're all compounded. So these stream crossings can have a serious impact on our rivers and streams. So there's several methods that Mountain Valley Pipeline is going to be using to construct the pipeline through the streams. There's the wet crossing method, where it's just an open cut through a stream where water is currently flowing in it. That method, I don't think they're going to be using that method. They're mostly going to be using dry crossing methods. So that dry crossing method is when they open cut. So they basically dig a trench through the stream bed in a dry area, and they'll use several methods to give themselves a dry construction area. Next slide. So the dry ditch method is when there's no water flowing through the stream. So an ephemeral or an intermittent stream. There's no water diversion needed because it's a dry stream bed, but there is stream bed disturbance and scouring that could occur when water does flow back through it during heavy rain events. And then the dry crossing methods, that's where they remove the water from their construction area. So the dam and pump is a dry crossing method. So they'll actually dam the stream at the upper end and dewater it and their construction area and pump that water around past their dams. So that method minimizes the release of sediment because you're working in a dry area, but it creates barriers for fish movement and impacts immobile species like mussels or benthic macroinvertebrates, the species that can't move once it's dewatered. And then the dams are also susceptible to mechanical failure of either the pumps or the dams, which can introduce sediment-laden water into the stream. Now, the boring methods, there's several different boring methods. There's a conventional bore. That's where they bore under the stream bed and run a pipe through the borehole. There's microtunneling or direct pipe where they pull or push the pipe through, and then there's horizontal boring where they can actually steer the drill bit. So the benefits of the boring under the streams is that the stream bed remains intact. So there's minimal disturbance to the stream bed and the banks. But the boring methods still require a large amount of water and drilling mud or bentonite clay, like a slurry mixture, to lubricate the drill bit. And there's a possibility of a bentonite blowout, which is when the pressure is so great around the drill bit that it can actually fracture the stream bed. And then there's failure, there's the risk of failure of dewatering devices. So when they're dewatering their bore pits, they're digging those trenches under the water, those bore pits under the water table, and then they're filling with water. So they're having to constantly dewater those bore pits, and there's a potential for failure of their dewatering devices. And then there's another risk of deflection of the drill bit where it can veer off course. So the conventional boring method is where they have two pits on either side of the water body, and they just bore straight through under the stream bed. The pits are excavated to the depth needed for the pipeline to pass under the stream channel, and the boring machines are lowered into the pits. So those pits might need to be quite large. And then once excavated, the pipe is pulled through the bore pit to the receiving pit. So these are some of the things that you might see in the field once construction starts. The direct pipe boring method, this is the method that they're using on the Greenbrier River. It's a micro tunneling boring machine, and it installs the pipe in a single pass. So with that, the drill bit is subject to deflection from cobbles and boulders that are greater than 14 inches. And then the operations must continue nonstop to prevent tunnel collapse. This particular boring is going to require 500,000 gallons of a water and slurry mixture. So there's potential for some accidents to occur there if not done properly. So some of the best management practices that you'll see in the bore pits are stockpiles of soil and drill cuttings. They should have a protective cover over those spoil piles, like hay or mulch or some kind of vegetative matting, something to prevent runoff from occurring if there's precipitation. And then the dewatering devices, I referred to those earlier. Usually they're like stacked hay bales with a filter fabric. So they pump all of the water out of the bore pits into these dewatering devices, and then the water filters out while the sediment remains. Some of the other best management practices that you'll see at the stream crossings, they'll have a timber mat bridge to get their equipment across the stream. And then they'll have to have sediment barriers around that bridge so that when it rains, all of the mud that's tracked onto that bridge doesn't just run off into the stream. They also have to have silt fences protecting the stream. They should have multiple layers of silt fences and filter socks to make sure that no sediment gets into that stream. And then they'll need to have hay or mulch on any disturbed areas to prevent erosion from occurring. So those are some of the methods that they'll be using as they start construction. We are hearing that that could happen in the next couple weeks. So what to look for when you're out visually assessing the construction activities. If you see stream water that's discolored with a sediment plume, such as the photo pictured, it's really important to try to investigate upstream to identify the source of that sediment. You'll also want to look out for sediment-laden water bypassing their erosion control. So this is basically like muddy water runoff that's leaving the construction site, bypassing erosion controls, and then sediment discharging outside of their construction area. So all of their erosion controls are meant to prevent that from occurring. So if any of those instances are occurring, that's something that we want to report to regulatory agencies. And then additionally, to look for at stream crossings, the stream flow should be diverted away from the disturbed ground. That was the dry crossing method that I referred to earlier. So you want to make sure that the water is being diverted, and any muddy water is going into a dewatering device. So there shouldn't be any muddy water that's flowing directly into the stream. They should have best management practices in place around the stream channel to prevent any erosion or sedimentation from entering that stream. And then you'll want to compare downstream conditions with upstream conditions. So if if we got a heavy rain event and the water is just as muddy downstream as it is upstream, then we know that their devices are working. However, if the water is really muddy downstream and you go upstream from their construction site and the water is clear, then we know that something from their construction site is running off and impacting that stream, and that would be a violation of their permit conditions. So again, I referred to those the bore pits that they'll be digging to put in their machinery to bore under the streams. So the groundwater is going to be entering those the trench or the bore pits, because they're going to be digging below the water table. So all of that muddy water should be pumped into a dewatering device so that the sediment can remain in the dewatering device and the clear water will be allowed to flow out. But what we've seen so far in the construction is that there's a lot of failures of those dewatering devices. So they're installed properly, they're not maintained, and they overtop or overflow. So what you see pictured there is an instance where their dewatering device failed, and all of that muddy runoff flowed outside of their dewatering device and into streams. So they shouldn't have any releases of sediment laden water into streams. That would be something you would want to report. So just a general, personal safety considerations. If you're going out monitoring, first of all, you always want to be courteous to the landowners, the pipeline workers, or anybody else that you meet along the way, and avoid confrontations. Respect private property, seek permission from landowners before entering private property, and then do not enter any active pipeline construction sites. They're going to be operating heavy equipment. They're not going to be expecting, the average person, like the general public, on those construction sites. So it would be very dangerous for any monitor to enter an active construction site as they're operating that heavy equipment. So you'll want to conduct any visual assessments from public roads or on private property where you have landowner permission to access. And then obviously don't put yourself in any kind of physically dangerous situation, like, trying to wade into a stream during high water to get a view upstream. We want to make sure you stay safe as you're out there monitoring. And then if you see anything that is a public health or safety hazard, don't feel like you have to contact us first. You can contact your local emergency management. And then with that, I will hand it over to Jenna to talk about our StreamWatch app.
Great. Thank you, Autumn. Good evening, everyone. My name is Jenna Dotson. I'm the staff scientist at West Virginia Rivers Coalition, and I'll be talking about how to use the StreamWatch app to document and report any issues that you may see. So the StreamWatch app is really a survey that's within the ArcGIS Survey 123 application. So you'll fill out a geolocated form and take pictures of whatever the incident might be. So I'm just going to go through an example of how to fill out that survey form using the picture that's on the upper right hand corner of this slide. So in this picture, we can see that this filter stock is not being properly maintained. So it's a failed erosion and control device, as Autumn mentioned. And so if we would want to report this, what would that look like? So this is what we'll see when we open the West Virginia Stream Watch survey. And we would go ahead and click on that plus button right there to start collecting the data. And then you have various fields that you need to fill out. So the one required field on this first screenshot is the stream name. So we do require that field. The following fields are contact information fields. So your name, your email address, and your phone number, which are optional. So you can report your survey anonymously, or if you would like us to follow up with you after your submission, then you can include your contact information and we'll follow up with you. If you continue scrolling down through the StreamWatch survey, then you'll come to the location information. So we'll automatically geolocate your site location, and you can click on the map to kind of double check that it's in the correct spot. And then the following question is going to ask you about your disturbance, or that's more generally, what is the issue that you are documenting with this survey? So if we're talking about that failed filter sock, then the issue would be related to sedimentation and erosion. If you continue scrolling down, then there'll be a more specific question about the disturbance category, if you will. So under sedimentation and erosion issues, you can see that there's 5 different options, 6 if you include other. So in this particular situation, we would select a failed erosion control measure. Continuing to scroll through the app, there's the DEP emergency spill hotline if it's a spill of hazardous waste material, and then we get to where you would take the photos. So there's 2 different options for uploading these photos. If you select on the camera icon, then it will automatically open up the camera on your cell phone, or if you already have the photos in the camera roll or in the photo roll of your phone, then you can select that folder icon and then you would be able to select those photos. And if you click on the little plus button, then you can continue to add more photos. So as you can see, we recommend that you take 1 to 3 photos, but sometimes you might need to take a couple more. And then the last field is the comment field. So this is where we ask you to describe any additional information that you think might be helpful. And that could be, for example, if you were, going upstream to try to figure out what the source was and you wanted to put more information about that in the comments, for example, that might be something that you put in the comments. And then to submit the survey, you'll go ahead and select that little check button down on the bottom right-hand side. And then this screen would pop up. So your survey is now completed. And if you have service, and we'll get to what you do when you don't have service in a second, but if you do have service, then you can go ahead and select that send now option. So then if you were to reopen the StreamWatch app, you can see, similar to your email, how there's an inbox, a sent box and an outbox, you would be able to see that you have one survey that you submitted in that sent folder, if you will. So that's how you collect data and how you send data. But as we all know, sometimes we are in situations where we don't have cell phone service. So in that situation, if you were to go to send the survey, it would tell you that your device is offline. So you would go ahead and select save in your outbox. So then when you return to service, you would see this when you open up the survey 123 application, and you can see that there's a little 1 in a circle that's telling you that you have 1 unsent survey. So you would open it up, you can see that you have 1 survey in your outbox. You would go ahead and select that, and then it would open up your outbox and you would go ahead and hit the send button there. And just a note about the surveys, filling out a survey when you don't have service. When you open up your outbox, so on the screenshot on the far right hand side of the screen, you can click on that survey, and I would just go ahead and double check that the location information is correct before you submit that survey. If you didn't have GPS signal when you were taking the survey, then you would just want to make sure that you're putting in the correct location for where you actually took those pictures. You can also view your sent data. So let's say you aren't sure that it's sent. Well, you have a sent folder there in the StreamWatch app as well. So you can see how many surveys that you've sent. And also when you open up that folder, they'll list them there for you. So in this case, only 1 survey is in my sent folder and it's listed right there. Another thing that's kind of handy is that you can view your sent surveys in list form or in map form. So if you were to select the little map icon right there, then this is the screen that you would see. And if you look where it's labeled South Hills, just north, kind of northeast of that, you can see that there's a 1 in the gray circle. So that would be the 1 survey that I've sent from that particular location. And then some tips on how to document issues and what are effective photos. So taking both wide angle photos and close up photos of the issue. So you're trying to strike a nice balance between detail and context. And then, as Autumn said, documenting upstream and downstream of the impacted area. So it would be best to be able to photograph the stream both above and below the impacted area if possible. And noting that you can travel downstream to document the extent of the issue, if that's possible. And then we encourage you to travel upstream to document the source of the issue. And the most effective photo is a water quality violation, such as the ones Autumn described, with the source behind it is the most effective photo. And then, as I said before, it's helpful if you describe the issue that you see in the comments. So let's say that you can see the extent of the issue downstream, but it's difficult to capture in a photo. So that might be something that you want to note and add additional information to in the comments section. And then after the submission, we will follow up with you, we being West Virginia Rivers or Power will follow up with you within 24 to 48 hours. If it's submitted on a weekend, then that would be like the Monday or Tuesday after the weekend. And then we will review those submissions to determine whether it's a reportable incident. And if it is, then we'll submit that information to the appropriate agency and follow up with you with the agency response. So again, that's where the contact information fields come into consideration. So if you don't fill those out, then it would be an anonymous submission. We wouldn't be able to follow up with you, but if you do fill those out, then we will follow up with you. Okay, so now I'm going to talk about downloading the StreamWatch app. I would suggest everyone listen, because there's going to be a very handy, detailed step-by-step PDF that's going to be sent out in our follow-up email that will walk you through this process. So if you just listen to the process first and then do this second, I think that might be a little more effective. So it's a 2-step process. So the first step is you download the ArcGIS Survey 123 app. So on your iPhone, that would be in your App Store, and Android would be Google Play. So just go to your App Store and you'll search for Survey 123 and download that application. The icon for the application is that little green hexagon there, and there's no need to create an account, no need to create a username or a password. So that's step 1, just downloading the app to your phone. Step 2 is then downloading the West Virginia StreamWatch form. So there's 2 ways to do that. You can either scan the QR code that is on the slide, but will also be in that PDF we'll send to you, or you can put that URL link in Safari or Google Chrome. So walking through that process, this is what ArcGIS Survey 123 app looks like in the App Store. So you'll select the option to download that to your phone. And then going on to step 2 of the process, this is a snapshot of what the PDF looks like when you use your QR scanner to scan the QR code. So you'll select the top option to open it in Safari or whatever your Safari or Chrome. And then it will take you to this page. And so then you'll select the Open in the Survey 123 Field app option. It may ask you to access your camera, and we recommend that you select OK, so you can take pictures using your phone and incorporate them into your submissions. And then when you open it up Survey 123, this is what it's going to look like. And you are going to select Continue without signing in. And every time you open up Survey 123 to do a StreamWatch submission, you're always going to select Continue without signing in. There's no need to sign into any account. And then if this is the first time that you have done this process, then the West Virginia StreamWatch survey would download within the Survey 123 application, and it will look like this. And when you get to this screen, then you are ready to submit an observation. So here's some helpful links to get everyone started. So this first link, that is the detailed kind of step-by-step PDF I described that goes into how to download the app and how to get the survey within the app, and also walks you through what a submission might look like. And then there's the second PDF here that's listed disturbances. That goes into a little more detail on those categories and gives you pictures of what those disturbances might look like. And there's also a training that was done when we first released the app that goes into a little more information if you wanted to take a look at that as well. And at this time, I believe I'm going to hand it over to my colleagues in Virginia.
Okay, I think that's me. I'm Dave Sly, Conservation Director with Wild Virginia. And I will warn you that my presentation is not nearly as well polished and organized as what you've just heard from these folks. My main object, I'm going to address a number of specific points, but my main object has always been to try to push the state of Virginia and some of the other agencies to do a better job of actually using the authorities they have. The Virginia DEQ has been uniquely bad at actually using the law that they have available to them. And so that's one of my big focuses, and I think I can maybe help to push that forward. And I am going to try to provide a bunch of this information in a more comprehensible fashion, through email when we follow up. So I wouldn't bother to try to take a lot of notes. There's a couple of things though that before I get to that kind of detail, one of the things that I would say is that it is necessary and it's useful to make these reports to the agencies, to the West Virginia DEP, to the DEQ, to the other agencies, the Corps of Engineers, the Forest Service. But I think that needs to be combined with essentially an effort to publicly expose these problems, the problems that are happening, but also the failures of the agencies when they don't respond quickly or at all. And so that I think needs to be a big part of this. And so that is another thing that I'll be focusing a lot on. The other thing is, and we talked about this amongst ourselves before, and that is that if you're not going to get out there, if you can't or don't want to be out there in the field, there are other things you can do to help this effort. Things like looking at possible aerial photographs, looking at inspection reports that some of the agencies do, and other things. There will be a list of those. One other thing I would say in April, Autumn is absolutely right in saying don't get into dangerous situations, don't be confronting the workers out there. Just, it's not worth it. It just doesn't make any sense. But one of the things people have mentioned to me is they're concerned that even when people are on public right-of-ways or on private property, that they might get confronted by these folks. It's happened before. And so what I would say is, again, don't put yourself in a bad situation and confront somebody. But also I would say don't allow them to keep us from doing what we have a right to do. So come back and make sure that we are paying attention to that. Let people know that that's happening, and we can figure out how to challenge that. So as I say, Virginia has been particularly bad at enforcing its own rules. And one reason for that is that they have essentially refused to acknowledge water quality problems, and especially water quality standards violations. West Virginia DEP has done that many dozens of times, but Virginia has not. And that's a problem. But we do have a little more tools, or a few more tools than we had in previous years in relation to trying to push Virginia to do the right thing. One other thing I wanted to note is that with all those hundreds of crossings, that's going to be a big area of focus. But in Virginia, there's still an awful lot of upland areas that have not been addressed. There's about 10 miles that haven't been cleared, 20 miles that haven't even been trenched, and many more where they haven't done the backfilling and all that. So there's going to be a lot of heavy equipment out there doing so-called upland work the things that are not directly related to the crossings. And those have been, at least in Virginia, the cause of a huge number of problems in the past. So I think that we can help to try to focus again in Virginia on some of those areas that are going to be most problematic for that kind of work. So Virginia has not only the permit that they issued to DEQ, but there's a part of Virginia law that gives them some powers to stop work along the pipeline. And that was actually strengthened in early 2021 with some new provisions. And so far, DEQ has not used those provisions as they need to. One of the things that Virginia inspectors and their contract inspectors have showed hundreds of times is that there has not just muddy water has come off site, but they have deposited significant amounts of sediment on the ground, on other people's properties, and in the streams and water bodies themselves. Something around 700 times, Virginia inspectors have documented that they're dumping their mud on other people. And over 100 times where there are measurable sediment deposits in streams. Under the updated, amended Virginia law, those are specific instances that can help justify stop work orders. Further, when those are happening on a systematic basis, on a widespread basis, and a lot of times in a certain period across the pipeline, they have the authority to stop work in the whole Virginia section, the whole 100 miles in Virginia. That could be important if they are causing problems at a lot of different sites, because if you get enforcement at one site, they're just going to run somewhere else and start doing the same thing until they get caught. So again, we're going to need to push DEQ and frankly, the water board to pay attention to these rules. We're going to show them that we know their rules as well as they do. And when it comes to making these observations, those kinds of things are going to be particularly important. So I just want to explain that. I mean, I'm not under any illusions that DEQ is going to want to stop work, that they're going to do it readily. But again, that's where you come to both putting pressure on them directly and maybe bringing up, some public exposure to the situation. So that was one of the main things I wanted to get across. And again, I can help to explain this in writing. I can help to kind of consult on that kind of stuff as we go forward. But I think it's going to be important because, I'll give you, for example, in the summer of 2021, even after that new legal authority was created, there were, I had the numbers here somewhere. There were 115 times between June and October of 2021 where MVP dumped their mud off of site onto other people's property and into water bodies. 115 times. Many of those were in some very short storm periods. And that was spread over at least a couple of the main spreads in Virginia. So that was the perfect kind of time when they should have used that authority that they have, and they just chose not to. One other thing is that, as I say, I'm going to be looking at a lot of the inspection reports, which I've done in the past. I've looked at thousands of them. But with help from other folks, I think we can keep a good eye on those and combine those with the work you guys are doing. It doesn't have to stand on its own. When we're getting the same kind of observations, the same kind of documentation from the official inspectors and from volunteers, then it has that much more weight. So I'm going to stop there. Again, I know that wasn't the most organized presentation, but I think we have some real strong tools is what I want to tell you in Virginia. And I think we're going to figure out how to push them hard. So I'll stop with that.
Thanks, Dave. That was really helpful. And I'll just add that the same rules apply to West Virginia as well. We don't have the exact same laws and water quality standards, but we do have permits in place, the 401 and the stormwater permit, that are enforceable by West Virginia DEP as well as Virginia DEQ. So yeah, we have the tools available to us to hold MVP accountable to their permit requirements. And with that, we can open it up for questions.
This is Stan. I've got a question for Jenna. At the beginning of your process of doing an observation, you're allowed to select a type of disturbance. Can you select more than one, or would you have to go back and do a second observation if you had more than one type of disturbance?
Yeah, I think